This is the Fight Strength Podcast.
All right, let's go.
Get the insight and perspective from two elite strength and conditioning coaches who work with the full spectrum of fighters from amateur to UFC champions.
That's it, JJ. Finish it.
We don't just talk about it.
Keep moving.
We are about it.
Don't stop. Let's roll.
We live this.
Come on, D.
You're listening to the Fight Strength Podcast with me, Phil Daru, and McGregor McNair.
Good job. That's how we roll.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us once again on the Fight Strength Podcast. This is episode number 50. Unfortunately, Phil Daru won't be joining us today, but that's okay. We can make up for that with the fact that we have two other extra special people joining us today. The first of which is Mr. Daniel Garner. How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing great.
Excellent. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having me, man.
Always a pleasure. And a familiar face for regular watchers of this show, Mr. Dan Howard. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks. It's been a while since I've been on, so yeah, it's good to get back on with you guys.
Excellent. Well, it's good to have you on. It's good to have you both on, and it's going to be good to kind of get into some of the media topics we're going to discuss today, which will surround Dan Garner's skill set, which is within the world of nutrition. And supplementation and all that sort of stuff. So, Dan, why don't you start by telling us who you are, what you do, and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. So I'm Dan Garner. I'm a strength coach and nutrition specialist from Canada. I've been on the Fight Strength podcast before, and what I really specialize in is nutrition for combat sports athletes. So been a fan of combat sports my entire life. Me and McGregor Dan, we've been talking about some of the old school fights that you can't really talk to any of your regular friends about. So
right,
we've been talking about some old school awesome
Pride,
fights.
Baby. Pride never dies.
Pride 2003 Grand Prix shout-outs. There's been a lot of stuff going on, but it's been an absolute blast down here. I work with a ton of combat sports athletes, pretty much everybody you can think of: wrestlers, jiu-jitsu practitioners, kickboxers, Muay Thai, MMA, amateur, high school, college, all the way up into the UFC. I've had the luxury to work with some of the best fighters in the world and do a lot of nutritional programming and lab analysis for them. So it's something where that's like what I really specialize in, and I'm just ready to talk game about any kind of questions you guys have on nutrition for combat sports athletes.
Love it, man. Unfortunately, we should have seen this coming and thrown the word out to the audience and possibly got some Q&A from them. But, you know, like, here we are in this position. I got one for you straight off the bat, dude.
It gives us an excuse to do another one, too, so I'm not complaining.
Sure does. But the first question I got is, can you give us just a quick rundown of who you're working with right now?
Right now, I'm working with a lot of fighters right now, but nobody in the absolute pros. So nobody right now in the absolute pros, and that's because I've been doing a lot of seminar touring and building a lot of online education platforms. So taking a little bit of a break from coaching in order to really teach coaches how I did it, how I went from working with absolutely nobody in a town of only 1,500 people to being able to be the coach of Michael Bisping when he won the world title, coaching Ronda Rousey, coaching Travis Brown, teaching people really how I did it, what I did, and what I do so that they can do it for their athletes as well.
Systemizing, yeah?
Yep, gone into education mode.
Love it. It's so cool. Systems are everything, especially when you get to the point where you need to scale a business.
100%. Yeah. When you got that many fighters contacting you, it's systemization and education.
That's great. And we were discussing off air creating your own freedom. Is that something you want to talk about at all today?
Yeah, I mean, it's something where I've talked to a lot of different coaches and trainers, and they've wanted to know how I've built up a business online. So if there's any coaches and fitness practitioners or personal trainers out there who have a skill set and who are interested in building a business online and leveraging their skills to have more income and impact in their life, then check out createfreedom.com. I've got a ton of resources on there that teaches trainers exactly how I did it, how I transitioned online, and how I've been able to work with so many pro fighters at the same time.
That's terrific, man. Daniel, why don't you fire away with the next question?
I'm just, to be honest, I'm really fucking keen and eager to kind of for him to get started and then go from there.
Okay.
Most of the interest that I'm looking for is kind of weight cuts for amateurs, to be honest. And I think a good things for people to kind of, or a couple of gym myths or something like that, nutrition myths, like, you know, like cutting out carbs for weight loss and all that sort of stuff. Would be really beneficial for the listeners, because, you know, that's one of the biggest myths I think around nutrition is I want to lose, you know, 5 kilos. I'm just not going to eat carbs for a few weeks and then that'll be sweet.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So that's definitely something we can touch upon for sure. It's one of the biggest myths in nutrition right now is that carbs make you fat. But that's simply not true. It comes down to what's known as energy balance. So the equation of energy in versus energy out on a day-to-day basis. Energy in the form of food and drink, and your actual digestive ability, because you aren't just what you eat. It's more accurate to say you are what you eat and actually absorb. So your energy in coming in the body of food and drink plus the efficiency of your digestion determines how many calories you're going to absorb on a day-to-day basis. That would be the energy inside of the equation. The energy outside of the equation is what a lot of people refer to as calories out. So through your physical activity, energy expenditure, and then also through various aspects of your metabolism. So how high your basal metabolic rate is, what are the levels and sensitivity to the different hormones in the body that regulate how many calories you're going to burn on a day-to-day basis, such as testosterone and estrogen and leptin and your thyroid hormones. These all play a big impact in how many calories a fighter is going to burn on a day-to-day basis. So the energy in the form of calories in and energy out in the form of calories out, these are the laws of thermodynamics. These aren't the laws of Dan Garner. This is physics, and this is something that hasn't been disproven in over 5 decades of controlled literature at this point.
Science, bro.
It is as much a law as anything in this industry, and there's only 3 possible states of energy that a fighter could ever be in at any given point of time. Number 1 is a state of hypercalorism, where your energy in is greater than your energy out on a day-to-day basis, so therefore you are going to gain weight. This is typically characterized by how you would set up a bulking diet. And then there's another state known as maintenance, where your energy in is equal to your energy out on a day-to-day basis, so therefore you would maintain your weight. This would be characterized by somebody who is happy with their current physique or wants to do what's known as a recomposition, where they build muscle and drop body fat at the same time. And the last energy state that one can be in is a state of hypocalorism, to where their energy in is less than their energy out on a day-to-day basis, so therefore they're going to lose weight. This would be characterized typically by a fighter in a fight camp trying to make weight and make things happen. So fighters need to understand that there's only 3 states of energy that one can possibly be in. Hypercaloric, where we're gaining, maintenance, where we're staying the same, and hypo, where we are losing. In no way, shape, or form is that representative of if you have carbs or not. Your body and your stomach doesn't look up your esophagus and say, well, that was protein and fat, so I'm not going to store that as fat, but those are carbs, so I'm definitely going to store those in the fat cell, right? The body does not see carbs. The body sees energy. A calorie is a unit of energy. It's not a unit of mass. So this is how weight management works, and it's one of the biggest myths in the fight industry, because it becomes very confusing. Because you'll talk to a fighter, I'm gonna drop all my carbs, and then I'm gonna have a great fight camp, and then I'm gonna lose weight. It's like, okay, cool. Well, how many calories are you having every day? I don't know. I got no idea. But that's the biggest problem. That if you don't have that, that's the number 1 rule, because it's a deal breaker, period. I don't care if you're on the best supplements in the world and you are eating organic food and you have the best fight coach in the world and you're even on the best strength and conditioning program in the world. If you're eating at maintenance, you're not losing a pound. It's a game of energy. You could have, it's a deal breaker. You could have everything else correct. But if you screw that up, then you've screwed up your fight camp. And that's what happens when so many fighters like, hey, Dan, I was going to contact you earlier, but I didn't. My fight's in 3 weeks, and I still have 15 kilos to lose. What should I do? That's the email I get. And I'm like, well, you should have emailed me 12 weeks ago, but you've screwed it up to this point, and now it's my job in order to clean this mess up. And that's simply a game of energy. So that's something that really needs to kind of end in the entire fight nutrition world, because what a lot of fighters will say, there's been kind of a wave of keto and a wave of low carb, but people will say things like, well, if you overeat your carbohydrates, you're going to store them as fat. What do you think happens when you overeat fat? The key word there is overeat. It's not carbs or fat. It's overeat. And this is something that puts you into a state of hypercalorism, which then in turn offset your energy, which then didn't allow you to make weight for your fight. So it's something where I'm constantly and consistently always adding carbohydrates into my fighter's plan all the way up until 7 days out. 7 days out is when I initiate the weight cut with a complete drop of carbohydrates. And this is kind of where the misconception's born, because a carbohydrate stored in the muscle cell, that's what's known as glycogen. So you have glycogen in the muscle cell that's stored in the form of lean tissue. But for every 1 gram of glycogen that gets stored in the muscle cell, 3.2 grams of water gets stored along with it. So when someone drops their carbohydrates, they'll see an initial drop in weight, not in body fat. They'll see an initial drop in weight because there's 3 times as much water in the muscle cell as there is glycogen. So we drop carbs out, we deplete our glycogen, we're going to get a handful of kilos of weight loss right away. Doesn't say anything about that being fat loss. So what I like to do is drop carbs only 7 days out, because then we're going to get that handful of kilos drop just to get some weight loss. But carbohydrates should be kept in the plan for as long as possible to support performance and support recovery, because fighting is an anaerobic sport and carbohydrates fuel anaerobic performance, period. So I keep them in for as long as humanly possible until that weight cut begins.
So on that, if I may, Dan, we all know that carbohydrates ain't carbohydrates. They're not all created equal. Is there any advice you'd give on choosing particular types of carbs, especially considering things like intolerances and stuff like that, leaky gut, whatever? Yeah,
for sure. So some people are going to have some issues with different types of carbohydrates. To make things very simple, a general rule would be fast-acting carbohydrates, intra and post-workout, and slow-acting carbohydrates outside of that window. So fast-acting carbs being in the form of supplementation and or liquid. So your carbohydrate powder.
Fattah Go and stuff like that?
Yeah, exactly. Fattah Go, actually. That's what I use with my highest level athletes. So that's something that has the highest rate of gastric emptying. It's something that's excellent for glycogen replenishment. It's very, 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 as in causes no GI distress. Something when if you're sparring or rolling or anything like that, the last thing you want is to be bloated or have that feeling where you shake and then you can hear water slosh around in your gut. That's the absolute worst. If I'm going to take a knee from Dan Howard, I'm going to die anyways, let alone if there's a bunch of fluid sitting in my gut.
Death by slush.
Yeah, exactly. It's the last thing anybody wants. So something with a quick rate of gastric emptying is very important. And you're going to have fast-acting carbs during and immediately after to support many different muscle fuel processes, but also nervous system fuel processes that a lot of people overlook. And we can get into that if you'd like as well. But fast-acting carbs during, slow-acting carbs outside. So things like quinoa, things like sweet potato, things like fruit. That would generally be your rule. And then I do recommend fighters go through something like a food sensitivity panel to make sure that they aren't eating foods that they're sensitive to. Because if you're sensitive to something, it causes a transient increase in total body inflammation. But what we know from the research is that inflammation causes water retention. So if you're having a food that you're sensitive to, that you don't know you're sensitive to, then you are causing water retention on your body, which is going to make your weight cut a hell of a lot harder. Something else that does this, if you're in your last week before weight cut, no weight training at all or no hard conditioning at all to the point that would make your muscles sore. Because when your muscles are sore, you have high levels of inflammation. We have inflammation, you have water retention. So we have to avoid inflammation via food so that we can make weight easier, but we also have to avoid self-induced inflammatory responses by training too hard, too close to a fight. You're in as good shape as you're ever going to be 5, 6, 7 days out from a fight. So going really hard at that point, it's contradicting to a lot of people's way of thinking, because they want to train hard to lose weight, but they're training hard to maintain their weight because it's causing inflammation and water retention. So there's a few ways that you can tackle that.
It's a little bit backwards. There's a couple of paradigm shifts that really need to happen within the industry. Last episode we were chatting with Dan Leith about similar things.
Cool.
You know, one of the paradigm shifts was a lot of fighters think that they need to be not fueling the muscle mass. They don't want to grow any more muscle mass. They want to kind of try and keep things exactly where they are. Whereas these guys use the mindset of, well, you need to fuel that muscle mass. You need more of it because its percentage of water is so much higher than other tissue. And that's where you draw the water from in a water cut or a water load. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, the percentage of water that's found in adipose tissue or fat tissue is so much lower than muscle, which is about 75% water. So when a weight cut happens, you want to be able to take from that fountain of water, because that's something that's going to make it so much easier. Much easier.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there's another area which I reckon we could probably make the bulk of this interview, if you like, which is everything surrounding pre, intra, and post-workout nutrition. Now, I know you've got a lot to say about this. I've been through a bunch of your podcasts in the past and stuff that you've put out there. Why don't you just walk us through your system, just the broad strokes of your system, how you prescribe, how you go about it?
Sure. So my system's going to change as of today, because pre-workout should be Melbourne coffee.
Oh!
It's absolutely delicious. It's beaten any other coffee that I've had anywhere else. So
fantastic.
Maybe the Garner protocol is going to change after today. But essentially, it's broken down into 4 phases. That's how I break down my pre, intra, and post-workout nutrition. But to kind of take a step back and move laterally here, something I would want to say before that I break down pre, intra, and post-workout nutrition, it's something I always tell my athletes, and it is pre-workout nutrition starts when the last workout ends, okay? Pre-workout nutrition starts when the last workout ends. Everything that you do once you finish your previous workout is going to either prepare you or not prepare you for your next training session. Meaning, you don't fuel the body with your pre-workout meal. You fuel the body by acting and behaving like an athlete 24 hours a day. So not sleeping the previous night, that's going to affect your training session. Getting drunk the previous night, that's going to affect your training session. Not caring about your nutrition at all, except for pre, intra, and post, doesn't mean that you're eating like a fighter. It means you're eating like a fighter for about 2 hours of your day, and then you're doing whatever you want for the other 22 hours, which is a very small percentage of time you're actually acting like an athlete. So I would employ people to get more serious about their nutrition, because it's something that allows you to perform, because you aren't what you can do. You only are what you can effectively recover from. And that recovery is what's going to determine how well you're going to perform in your next Muay Thai session, your next sparring session, your next strength and conditioning session. So that stuff are, like, I would consider them the big rocks in the jar that make up the jar of human performance. And then when you're starting to add in little pebbles after that and little sand after that, that's when we start looking at things like pre, intra, and post-workout nutrition. And it's still important because it still has a difference. And if I can get a 10% difference in my fighter compared to the other fighter, well, 10% could be a KO. 10% means you're a lot faster. 10% means you're more recovered. So pre, intra, and post still matters. And how I'll typically set it up is across 4 phases. Phase 1 is about 1 to 3 hours before the training session. Phase 2 is about 30 to 45 minutes before the training session. Phase 3 is during the training session. And phase 4 is immediately after the training session. There is no better time in your 24-hour period that you're going to be able to metabolize carbohydrates into lean tissue than pre, intra, and post-workout. So this is where I'm actually putting about 70% of my athletes' daily carbohydrates. I'm loading this window full of it for two main reasons. Number one, once you store, like I talked previously, once you store a carbohydrate in a muscle cell, it becomes what's known as muscle glycogen. And it's in the muscle cell, but you could also consider it a prison cell. Because once that muscle glycogen is stored, it actually has to be burned in that muscle cell. It cannot be rebroken down and enter circulation again. It is in that muscle cell and it's going to be burned in that muscle cell, period. Okay? That's actually what the muscle cell's preferred fuel source is muscle glycogen, especially in anaerobic events, which is combat sports. But what a lot of people don't know is the fact that blood glucose is actually the prime fuel source for the nervous system. So muscle glycogen feeds muscle performance, whereas blood glucose, which is also carbohydrates, feeds nervous system performance. And the way in which I like to explain it to my athletes is your muscle is like a V12 engine. Your V12 engine might have all the horsepower in the world, but it doesn't matter at all unless there is a driver in the driver's seat pressing down on the gas pedal. That's what the nervous system is. The nervous system is what allows you to actually recruit muscle fibers for contraction so that you can be the best fighter that you can possibly be. We need the engine and we need the driver so that driver can put the gas pedal down as hard as possible. And then after training, we refuel that tank and we let the driver go home for sleep so that he can rest and we can come back and kick some ass again tomorrow. Carbohydrates do that. That's something that they're very effective at. So with my athletes, I'll have them do phase 1, which is 1 to 3 hours prior to training. If the workout is about 1 hour long, we'll do a 1-to-1 ratio, carbohydrates to protein. If the workout exceeds 2 hours, we'll do a 2-to-1 ratio of carbohydrates to protein. So more carbs than we do protein. Then, once we're moving into the phase 2 section of their advanced nutrient timing strategy, phase 2 only exists if you couldn't do phase 1 in the form of solid food. So phase 1 should always be a whole food meal, but if you are waking up and upon waking you have to go right to sparring or right to a workout, then we'll actually mimic what phase 1 looked like in phase 2, but with easier digestible forms. So something like a whey protein shake and a banana, or just something that's so much easier digested. Or if phase 2, another option in phase 2 is if you actually did eat your whole food meal in phase 1, then phase 2 we could use that window to use certain stimulants like caffeine or alpha GPC, something that's been demonstrated to improve power output once again in anaerobic or alactic events so that these fighters get the best benefit possible. And then phase 3 is during the training session. Now during the training session we're going to have, like I said previously and like McGregor pointed out, we're going to have powder-based carbohydrates, so something like Fattah Go, but then I'm also going to include essential amino acids in there, not branched-chain amino acids, but essential amino acids in there, so we get all 8. That's going to be far superior than branched-chain amino acids for intra-workout performance. And we're going to mix your carbohydrates and your amino acids in a 6 to 8% solution, meaning only 6 to 8% of your intra-workout drink should be in the form of powder. So if, for example, if you have a 500 milliliter water bottle, 8% of that water bottle is 40 grams of powder. So you're maximally only going to have 40 grams of powder in a 500 milliliter water bottle. And we do this because the literature has shown that if you don't have enough water in order to account for how much powder is in your intra-workout shake, then it can dramatically reduce your gastric emptying. So you're going to have too much powder and not enough transporters, not enough water to actually get that powder assimilated out of the small intestine and then into circulation and to the muscle where it's supposed to be. And then last but not least, to make a long answer long, we are going to move into phase 4. And phase 4 is a combination of carbohydrates and protein. Ideally, to individualize the efforts of the listeners of your podcast, we would have about 1 gram of carbohydrates per kilo of body weight. and we would have 0.5 gram of protein per kilo of body weight. And these two would be taken immediately after training. You can do it in the form of a whole food meal, but if you do want to accelerate recovery at a faster rate, I prefer this in powder form as well.
Wow.
All right.
Unpack that, Daniel.
Oh, shit. Yeah.
It might have been a pen and paper moment for the listeners.
Yeah. It looked like I wasn't listening. I was definitely listening. I was just trying to take as many notes as physically possible. And that was
I want to apologize to everybody. I did have a lot of coffee today, so I think that's what's bringing all these explanations forward. It's Melbourne coffee.
First thing, I'm not sure about I'm not sure where most of the listeners are from this show, but the Targo in Australia is pretty. It's hard or it's expensive to get. Last time I checked, I don't know if you've looked lately, Mac. That was probably 6 months ago, or probably even a little bit longer. It's either expensive or hard to get, especially with the shipping. Mm-hmm. Do you know any other supplement or anything you can use instead of the Targo?
Yeah, you can use something. Gaspari makes something known as Glycofuse. That's not bad. And then there's another one that comes out of California, actually. It's called 3 something, I think. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Maybe. No? Nobody knows what I'm talking about. It might not even have a 3 in it. No. Maybe I shouldn't have gone down that. But I've got 2 professional fighters that are my current clients right now in Brisbane. One's in Ryzen and the other is in One Championship. And I have both of them on Vitargo. So it's doable, maybe in Brisbane, but I've got 2 pro fighters in Brisbane right now who are both on it. So it should be doable for Aussies one way or another. And to be honest, I just there's always a difference between good and optimal. And I want optimal for my fighters.
Well, another option.
Yeah, obviously you always want to go with the best. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But I mean, for Aussies who are having trouble getting their hands on Vitargo, bulknutrients.com.au. You can buy whichever of the powdered carbohydrates you want on its own. I mean, you're not stuck with a retail product that's filled with all kinds of different proprietary blends and different ingredients. I mean, if you just want dextrose monohydrate, you can buy a 5 kilogram bag of just that one nutrient.
Yeah.
And so that's what I really like about what bulk nutrients do. Now the only question there is, what kind of quality is there, pharmaceutical grade? You know what I mean? But I mean, if you just want to single out the one nutrient, there is the option to do that.
Yeah, and brace yourself, everybody, because everybody tends to hate on me when I say this, but don't be afraid to use something like Gatorade or Powerade, okay? It's something where, that's another myth that we could totally unpack right now. People tend to pick on Gatorade and Powerade just because they're gigantic names in this industry, but they're not bad products. They're combinations of glucose and fructose. That's what they are. And we know from the literature, if you understand digestive biochemistry, there's a good reason why it's a combination of glucose and fructose. Glucose, when it enters the small intestine, it utilizes something known as the sodium glucose transporter 1 transporter to get out of the small intestine and into circulation. So it needs to be bound to this sodium glucose transporter in order to get out of the small intestine. And when you're looking at the research, glucose can be exited out of the intestine at about a rate of 1 gram per minute or 60 grams per hour. So it was previously thought in sports science that you could only have about 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour of physical activity, and that's where you would tap out, not because of the muscle, but because of the transporter availability within your stomach. But then they started adding fructose, and they started seeing higher levels of performance. And what was found out is that although glucose forms use sodium glucose transporter 1, fructose actually uses something known as GLUT5. So it uses, and that's just glucose transporter 5. And what was found is that instead of 60 grams of carbohydrates being uptaken per hour, when you do a combination of glucose and fructose, you can bump this up to somewhere in between 75 and 80 grams per hour. So it was a dramatic increase. It hasn't been completely pinned down yet, but we're talking about 20 more grams of carbohydrates per hour just because you're adding fructose. And Gatorade and Powerade have both glucose and fructose, and they also have electrolytes in them. So if you mix that in a 6 to 8% solution, you're still doing yourself a lot of good. There's no reason to hate on those products. They're very usable, especially if you're on a budget.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Good. I've never said anything bad about them two, to be honest, and I've heard a lot of crap talks about them, but I think the main thing is people think they need it, and it is 100% necessary if they're training, if they're sweating, and a lot of people just kind of drink it instead of water.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think that's where it kind of gets to the extent that it is bad. You know?
Yeah. It is bad if you think it's just like a drink for athletes and that you have it outside of a training workout.
Yeah.
It's like, don't have it outside of training. Fast acting is only during and after. Outside should be your whole food. Your good, your quality carbohydrates is what you most people would refer them as.
And with that said, I mean, Gatorade, Powerade, they've got not just a mix of carbohydrates, but they've got a blend of electrolytes. Now, my question to you is, when we're talking about pre, intra, post workout nutrition, electrolyte balance can be, it's a hotly debated topic, but I believe it's Mark Schaus has a product called Cineplex. Do you know the one?
Yeah, I know he's big on like a ton of potassium and not a lot of sodium.
Yes.
Yeah.
I believe that's somewhat accurate in terms of what the balance is between those electrolytes. But can you give us your thoughts on how to correctly balance electrolytes for in and around a workout?
Yeah, well, I think that the reason why a lot of people have a lower potassium status isn't because of their training, it's because of their diet. So I like to include potassium more so outside of the training window than inside of the training window. And here's why. Let's say I put a dead frog in front of both of you guys right now. This is going to be a fun example. Let's say I put a dead frog in front of both of you guys right now. And then you guys sprinkled a little bit of salt on his legs. Well, his legs are going to start contracting. And that's because sodium causes muscular contraction. Even though he's dead, his legs are going to start dancing. They do this in Japanese cuisine as well, and they pour soy sauce over tentacles, and the tentacles start getting all weird. I don't know why that's appetizing, but it's something that they do. But then that dead frog, once his legs start contracting, after that, if you start sprinkling potassium salt on his legs will then relax. And that's because sodium causes muscular contraction, potassium causes muscular relaxation. And it's important to have a combination of both of those because you need to be able to relax in the ring no matter what combat sport you're in, but you also need to be able to contract at maximal velocities as well. But if you don't have enough potassium, what's contraction without relaxation? It's a cramp. It means that muscle's spazzed up. So a lot of times when people are waking up in the night, say with hamstring cramps, or a cramp in their foot arch, or a calf cramp, or if they're cramping a lot in activity, it can be an issue with potassium. Now, kind of as a side note, magnesium is actually the doorman. So the magnesium actually regulates intra and extracellular concentrations of sodium and potassium. So it doesn't matter if your potassium and your sodium is perfect because magnesium is letting people in and out of the muscle cell anyways. So magnesium by itself can screw up both of those concentrations. It's one of the reasons why we've seen in the research that magnesium helps prevent cramps as well. But to getting back to my point, I like to during training to have about a 1-to-1 ratio of sodium to potassium and then just include more potassium outside of the training window because I don't want too much of that relaxation activation happening during activity because we do want very strong muscular contractions. And I think something else that's incredibly important to note is that when we sweat, we lose over 3 times as much sodium than we do potassium. That's the reason why, if somebody's wearing a black shirt and they wear it for a long time, they start to get that white ring around their armpit. That's salt. or when you're training in the gym and a gross salty sweater is on the bench press before you and there's a white line around it, it's because they're sweating out salt. But we're losing over 3 times as much salt as we are potassium in the gym or in our combat sports training sessions. So I like my salt in there. It's causing muscular contraction, and I'm also losing salt more than 3 times as fast as potassium. So I would rather add potassium outside the window because I don't want too much relaxation inside of the training window, and then keep it a 1-to-1 ratio because I'm losing sodium so fast. So that's generally how I approach it.
That's excellent. Daniel, you still there?
I'm still here. Sorry, I was listening. I was just looking in because from my last question about Fattah Go, you can actually get it in Australia now. So
Oh wow, excellent.
And it's reasonably cheap. You're looking at sort of like $90 for that. It looks like about a kilo, maybe 2 kilos, which is pretty fucking awesome.
Yeah, 2 of my current clients, Elliot Compton, he's in 1FC, and Damian Brown, he just got a contract with Ryzen. He's a UFC veteran too. They're both on Fattah Go. I have those guys on Fattah Go year round, so I knew it was available in some dark corner of the Aussie internet.
Yeah, so it's on I've got it on ASN at the moment, so if ASN wants to sponsor us as well, that's fine.
Sure. Just DM us.
And myself. Come on.
Yeah. Also got essential amino acids, $60 from Bulk Nutrients, as you were saying earlier, Mac. $60 for a kilo. So
love it.
Yeah, so you can get both of them in Australia. I don't know where our listeners are from, but yeah, Australia do. It's pretty easy to get at the moment by the looks of it.
Bulk Nutrition can send me a commission if they want to. If they're listening.
Yeah.
Me first. I've been banging on about them for a long time.
Have you really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that's a good sign because that means it's changing. Yeah, because like 6 months ago, I know it was very expensive to get stuff just with shipping costs. Very expensive to get.
And the conversion as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really good that it's changing, things are on the go, things are on the up, so that's good.
As a Canadian, I've also suffered the conversion costs of US dollars.
Indeed. Yeah, it's a killer.
Yeah.
Well, what's the Canadian dollar at right now?
In comparison to the US?
US, yeah.
Where we're at like a US dollar is I think $1.25 compared to our dollar. So it's like about 25-30% more is the average.
It's in the ballpark, same ballpark as the Aussie dollar.
Canadian and Aussie are very, very similar. When I bought Aussie cash before I came out here, the Aussie dollar was at 99 cents compared to a Canadian.
Yeah,
I was like, we've beat you by 1 cent. We've got you. I said that in the bank too. I was like, yes.
Yeah. I can even remember back in about 2005, 2006 when I was in Canada.
Yes, sir.
So we were neck and neck back then.
When you were drinking Tim Hortons like a real man.
That's right. That's when I fell in love with filter coffee.
Yeah. Love it.
Now I've been spoiled with all the cafes around Melbourne. But what are you going to
do? They're better. I'm not going to sit here and puff my chest up.
But it's good. I think there's plenty of awesome stuff in there to unpack. We could dive in as deep as we wanted to. But one of the other kind of main topics I wanted to hit you up on right now is about meal frequency and all the different considerations surrounding that.
Yeah.
Please share with us some of your philosophies and systems.
Sure. So I would like to kind of address that. No real philosophies. I'm a very science-based man. So yeah,
I cheerfully take that back.
Yeah, one of my.
That's a Poliquin question for you. That is.
Jesus Christ, this fucking guy.
I love it. Yeah, one of my things that I'm quoted on most is I say nutrition is not a belief system. I don't care what you believe. Nutrition is a science. Human metabolism is a science. And when you understand the science, you're able to apply the right tool at the right time in order to get the desired adaptation you want out of your athlete, period. So, if anybody's interested, I wrote an article that went viral on precisionnutrition.com They had me, they were like, hey, do you want to write an article? And I was like, sure. And then I just fire. It's just like fire. It's like, I want to rip on everybody that is wronged in the past about this. So nutrition is not a belief system. It's a cool article to read. But in any case, moving on to meal frequency. Meal frequency is a science that it basically represents how many meals you choose to have per day. So if you're going to have a regular consistent meal cadence of, say, anywhere from 4 to 6 meals per day, or if you're just going to have 3 meals per day, or if you're going to try the intermittent fasting approach, there's a lot of different ways you could spin this conversation and make a long answer very long once again. But I think that it's important to point out for fighters that it's very wise for a fighter to have a more regular meal frequency and not go on to an intermittent fasting approach. So I like my fighters to have about 4 to 6 meals per day, and this primarily comes down to the battle between two things. There's two things always happening within an athlete's body: the fractional synthetic rate and the fractional breakdown rate. Now, the fractional synthetic rate is a rate at which you can measure protein accretion to a muscle after a hard workout. So essentially, the muscle repair and or muscle growth. So that we're just essentially measuring protein being added to muscle tissue post-workout. And depending on the volume and intensity of a workout, you can build and repair muscle for up to 4 days after that training session. So it's something that happens 24 hours. That's the key thing that I want people to remember. On the other hand, there's another thing known as the fractional breakdown rate. And this measures the rate at which you lose protein out of your body on a day-to-day basis. Because although training is eventually anabolic for muscle tissue, the process of training is actually catabolic. So we do break our own muscle tissue down on a daily basis in order to build it back up. And our organs do this as well. The entire process between buildup and breakdown is within an equation known as protein turnover. So we're turning over protein on a daily basis, adding and losing. That's why we need to eat it every day in order to replace what we lost. Now, this is why we actually have to have a regular meal frequency, because what I wanted you to note earlier is that we recover from exercise 24 hours a day for up to 4 days after a hard session. And muscle recovery is an amino acid driven process. Amino acids are the only thing that's going to go to that muscle and be able to feed it what it lost, what it was broken down during training. And since this happens 24 hours a day, we need to have a 24-hour amino acid availability within our bloodstream to both support the fractional synthetic rate and also fight the fractional breakdown rate. Because if we don't have amino acids in the bloodstream to support the synthetic rate, then we are going to be in a state of negative protein balance. So the fractional breakdown rate will exceed the synthetic rate. So we're going to be breaking down more muscle tissue than we are currently building up. Now, really important point. There's only 2 ways in which any fighter listening to this podcast can get amino acids in the bloodstream to feed their muscle recovery. The first way to get protein in your bloodstream to feed muscle recovery is through your diet, dietary protein intake. The second way to get amino acids in your bloodstream to feed a muscle group for recovery is to rob from Peter to pay Paul. And this is the big problem. So if you do a hard leg workout today and then there's no amino acids available within your bloodstream at midnight tonight, well, then your body's going to say, all right, McGregor, well, you haven't used this rear delt in about a week now, so I'm going to take some amino acids from your rear delt and I'm going to redistribute them to your legs in order to support your leg recovery. So what will happen is your legs actually will recover and your legs will actually grow because that's what they've done. They've added protein to them. but you as a whole haven't gained muscle tissue. So you didn't actually increase your protein balance in the body. You didn't actually gain muscle. You just redistributed it from one area of the body to another to support the local recovery that the body needed at the time. This is eliminated if we have an even distribution of protein throughout the day. So what will happen from a meal is you'll typically have amino acids in your bloodstream for anywhere from 3 to 4 hours after a meal. So regular meal frequency ensures that we have 24-hour amino acid availability in the bloodstream to fight the breakdown rate and fight the synthetic rate, or fight the breakdown rate and feed the synthetic rate, it's a more accurate way to say it, and to ensure that protein redistribution throughout the body never, ever, ever happens. And fighters need to care about that, because in a fight camp, like we were talking about previously, you need to feed the muscle. We don't want to lose the muscle. We need to feed the muscle. We want fat loss in your fight camp. We don't want muscle loss in fight camp. Muscle loss is driving combat sports performance. So in order to maintain as much possible lean muscle mass going into your fight, it's wise to have a regular meal frequency and avoid things like intermittent fasting or skipping meals or anything like that. They have some other health benefits, but they certainly don't have combat sports benefits.
So then what are some of the individual factors that anyone listening might be questioning, which is best for me, which way of distributing all these amino acids, meal frequency, timing, all this stuff? What are some of the individual factors?
Individual factors really would just come down to dosing. So the most advanced protein timing strategy that anybody could use in the entire world is simply use an even distribution of protein throughout the day.
Right.
So what you would want to do is, okay, this is how many kilos of body weight I am. I should have 2.2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight per day every single day, whether it's a training day or a non-training day. Now, I'm going to have also 6 meals per day. So whatever that math was, it's kind of hard to, whatever, like say 80 times 2.2, whatever the hell that is. I would need a calculator. I use a calculator for everything. But you would take that number and divide it by 6 and ensure you have an even distribution throughout the entire day so that you do have 24-hour amino acid availability. So that would be one individual way in which you could individualize it a little bit more for the listeners. But another thing to take important note of is the minimum per meal. So younger athletes, their minimum per meal would be 0.3 grams of protein per kilo of body weight. So that'd be the absolute minimum that they should have in a meal in order to get the proper anabolic stimulus from it. But as athletes get over 40 years old, you're going to need to bump that up to about 0.4 to 0.5 grams of protein per meal, because older athletes run into something known as anabolic resistance, where it's harder for them to build muscle tissue, and it's also harder for them to fight the breakdown of their muscle tissue. So it's a whole area of research that's, Stu Phillips has done some great research in this area, to where younger people get away with keeping their muscle and building muscle a lot better than older people. So the older people, it's still going to be 2.2 grams of protein per pound of body weight per day, but they need more protein per meal in order to ensure they get the same anabolic response from it.
And there's a lot of inbuilt processes that resist the maintenance of that tissue, right?
Yeah, for sure. As you get older, there is a natural decline in metabolic rate. There's a natural decline in enzyme activity. So you're the catalysts that are supposed to be promoting protein synthesis and promoting glycogen replenishment and promoting muscle repair. These things all slow down. And as you get older, there's also that natural reduction in testosterone. And testosterone by itself helps fractional synthetic rate, and testosterone by itself also fights the fractional breakdown rate because it is an anabolic hormone. That's why people inject it. So it's something where as you get older, your decrease in metabolism, your decrease in enzyme activity, and your decrease in testosterone result in a combination that is anabolic resistance.
So just while I plug a charger into my computer here, sorry everyone, tell us your thoughts on TRT since you brought it up.
I didn't bring up TRT.
You did.
I didn't bring up TRT.
You talked about injecting anabolic hormones. But
this is a very personal question coming from McGregor now.
No. This is for a friend of mine, right?
Yeah, for a friend.
No. Honestly, though, I'm working with a guy in his 50s, and we've been throwing around the idea.
Yeah.
We're starting to see some plateaus in his strength. Not that he wants to win any powerlifting competitions or anything like that, but he loves the training. He's got a few injuries that we always have to navigate. What are some of the pros and cons? What are some of the pitfalls?
I mean, as far as we're concerned right now, there's not a lot of cons, to be perfectly honest. And I don't want to be some TRT advocate. It's just the literature is quite sound right now. As males get older and their testosterone starts to decrease, introducing testosterone back into their bodies can increase their libido, it can increase their strength, it can increase their muscle mass, and a lot of people don't know that low testosterone is actually one of the cardiovascular heart disease risk measures. So when you have lower testosterone, that's something that is not very good, and it's something that can play towards your overall cardiovascular disease risk profile. So getting it back up to an area that is healthy and safe can be something that's advantageous, especially for the older individual who needs it. But the emphasis is who needs it, okay? There is a misapplication of TRT at times because very obvious things reduce testosterone, like if you have a lot of stress in your life, or if you have high levels of inflammation in your body, or if you have a zinc or magnesium deficiency, or if you have a poor sleep length and sleep quality at night, or if you have poor gut health, right? There's a lot of systemic issues in the body that result in testosterone decreasing itself. So when you have somebody who, let's just use an easy example. Let's say somebody's sleep quality is poor. They wake up very fatigued every single morning, and then they say, hey, I'm fatigued. I also have low testosterone. Can I have testosterone replacement therapy? Well, this is something I always say to my students. The symptom isn't the problem. The symptom is the result of the problem. So in a case like that, low testosterone would have been the symptom. It was not the problem. The root of the problem was your sleep length and sleep quality. So if you improved your sleep length and your sleep quality, your testosterone would have had a transient increase from there, and you wouldn't have a low testosterone anymore. So although I think TRT is something that has had a lot of benefit in people, and people who truly need it will get a benefit from it, but if you're somebody who has low testosterone because you're not taking care of yourself in the rest of your life, then you're mowing the lawn while the house is on fire. You're focusing on the wrong problem, man. You don't need to mow the lawn right now. Your house is on fire. So it's like if you deal with that, then your testosterone would have came up naturally, and then you wouldn't have had to deal with injecting yourself every week. It's something that your body didn't even need. So if you need it, it's good. But I think a lot of people actually don't need it, and they just need to change their bad habits.
Yeah, it's so true. But I mean, when you're dealing with a lot of alpha males, a lot of fighters, even a lot of general population clients, you're going to see that a lot of people just want to take the easiest route to get what they want.
Fix, right?
People they associate testosterone with being jacked.
Yep.
There's this whole mystique surrounding it. They think if they go straight for that, they get the thing that they want.
Yep.
Whereas, again, this is a common theme for me lately, is using the health of the athlete, the health of the organism, to be the compass for all of the decisions you make. And oftentimes, going straight for that quick solution, the testosterone, is not the safest or the healthiest thing for the athlete or the individual.
Yeah, I totally agree.
That's just going on to the problem of like social media and marketing though as well. You got to think, because it's not going to sell any selling product. They're going to sell it if I say this increases testosterone. This is going to get you massive. It's going to get you ripped. They're not going to sell any product if they go, oh yeah, this guy got 10 hours sleep a night and he got massive and ripped.
Yeah.
It's not nice. That's not good marketing.
Maybe we could productize something.
Yeah. Well, guys like us can profit on that because we sell expertise. We don't sell products. So it's something where it depends on how you spin it. But yeah, I totally agree. It's pretty tough to sell anything when it's like, hey, this guy decreased his stress and look at him now.
Yeah. Oh, there are guys out there that are really preaching the bring down the stress levels message. I mean, Luke Lehman is one of them. Joel Jamieson with all the Bioforce HRV and the Morpheus, the recovery coach.
Yep.
The word is out there. It's not a sexy message.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean that's fighting though. Like, I mean, when you see the most spectacular knockouts in the UFC, the only reason it happened is because of a lot of unspectacular preparation.
Yeah.
That's how it works. It's a lot of repetition. It's a lot of fundamentals. It's a lot of the basics. It's like, Dan, you and I were just talking about the fundamentals yesterday before that training session. Fundamentals. You work on these for like a year, and then maybe we'll add one thing.
Yeah. That's it. No one likes to it, and no one thinks about it when all that happens. But 10 seconds isn't 10 power involved in it. So yeah, definitely.
The basics. Yeah. Sorry, we lost you for a second there, Dan.
Yeah, so that was gold there. That was gold. I was just giving away everything there. You just lost.
Sorry, mate.
We're screwing up the basics of podcasting here.
That was not the case at all. But yeah, I mean, I never knew that about you, Daniel. When you were in Thailand, one of the first times, what did you say? Your crew told you you're only allowed to step forward, jab, cross, and then step back.
That's it. That was before Thailand. So that was even, when I first started Muay Thai back in England.
Right.
Yeah, it was just basic shadowboxing. Just step forward, jab, cross, step back. No hitting pads, no nothing like that. Just to get that basic, just to get your range all the time, so you know exactly where you are. You're not going to panic if you get rushed or anything like that. You've always got your stance, and that's kind of where your home is. So yeah, a lot of hours doing that. A lot of hours as we're talking, just doing the very, very basic stuff, just to get it down to a T. So then when you're moving on to the more advanced stuff, you've always got that to fall back on,
Yeah.
So, and you look at all the fighters, that most of the knockouts that happen is very, very basic movements, very basic stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at in jiu-jitsu competition, sorry to cut you off there, Dan. You were cutting out anyway. When you're talking about jiu-jitsu competition, Hodger Gracie, greatest of all time. You watch his blueprint for every one of his wins. It's just dead basic, high level execution in jiu-jitsu. I mean, you can map out just about every one of his wins. You can see exactly what he's done. It's very simple, but he does it better than anyone else. That's why he's the best,
Yeah. Like I was saying too, when I've heard about some of the Klitschko brothers' training sessions, it's like, okay, 500 jabs, 500 right cross, 500 left hook. It's like just repeat, boom, boom.
Imagine the camera crews for that session.
The camera crews would be like, come on, swing some battle ropes around.
Do something.
Do some battle ropes. Push a prowler around. This is 500 jabs. The cameraman would have been like, geez. Yeah.
That might have been why they did it, so the camera crews never come back.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. That'll be a sneaky Russian tactic.
Yeah. But I mean, back to the nutrition and doing the basics and everything surrounding that. I think I keep coming across personalities that want to go for the really, really complicated, the sexy, the new fad, the new thing. What would you say to people that fit this category? Would they just want to go for the exciting, the sexy, the new, the easy? What do you say to these people to bring them back to the truth, to the message, to the basics?
Stop majoring in the minors. You're focusing on a lot of the things that give the smallest return on investment. The fundamentals are the fundamentals for a reason. They work, and they are the foundation of any pyramid for success. The how high you can build a skyscraper only depends on how strong you build the foundation. That always has to be in place. And when I'm coming across people and fighters, their foundation is completely destroyed, and yet the top of the building they have looking pristine. So they've got like kind of the best supplements in the world, which is the very top of the pyramid, something they get a very small return on investment from, and yet they don't know how many calories they have on a day-to-day basis. They don't know how many macronutrients they have a day-to-day basis. Their nutrient timing structure falls against a lot of the laws that we know in nutrition surrounding synthetic rates and breakdown rates, and what people need to be doing to optimize both performance and recovery, because those are two different things we need to fuel. And so I would just say stop majoring in the minors. And so often in nutrition, and also so often in training, new and improved does not beat tried and proven. Okay? New and improved does not beat tried and proven. Tried and proven means we have the legitimate data that's there, that is predictable to get a desired adaptation response out of you. There is way more than enough information already in existence to truly get world-class results. So stop guessing and stop trying to do something new, and hire a coach who really knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the tried and true has not just stood the test of time, but it's stood all the scrutiny and all the critiques and all the conflicting studies surrounding it, all the different agendas pushing different studies surrounding it. You know, like tried and true beats new and improved.
Oh yeah, That would be the one message I would want them to take home and remember from this podcast for sure. Yeah,
definitely. Anything to add to that, Daniel?
No, that's it. I think he's pretty much covered it. It's just that, you do get a lot of people just, overcomplicating it a lot. So you get people like really trying to get down into the basics. They'll see like a bodybuilder's diet or something like that, and they'll be trying to, when the bodybuilder's trying to get down to like 3 or 4% body fat or something, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I might as well do this from a fight. It's like, fuck, if you go into a fight at 3 or 4% body fat, you're not going to do too well,
Would not have thought so.
Yeah, I think that's it. You just got to keep it simple, and you just got to keep to your level. If you're fighting amateurs, if you're fighting, even same day weigh-ins or anything like that, then you don't want to be doing the same sort of stuff that the pros are doing.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's great. Well, gentlemen, we probably need to talk about wrapping this one up. We have the pleasure. For those listeners unaware, we have the pleasure of actually having Dan Garner in Melbourne with us in studio today here at Fitline Personal Training. We had to kick Dan Howard out. You see, his Skype connection just wasn't working, so he had to go home so he could Skype in. But it's been an absolute pleasure having you with us, Dan.
Thank you very much,
Dan Garner, that is.
Thank you very much for having me, man. I love being on the Fight Strength podcast. Love hanging out with you guys. If anybody's ever in Melbourne, check out Fitline and get Dan Howard to hold some pads for you. I did a session with him just yesterday, and he's the absolute man. So thank you for having me on the podcast, and I love being here in Melbourne.
Very, very welcome, man. And you've got a seminar coming up on the weekend, but this show won't be live before then. But perhaps it'll be live before the Sydney one. So do you want to tell everybody what's going on there?
Yeah, for sure. So day one, I'll be this will be in Sydney. So the Hotel Rendezvous Sydney Central is where it'll be. And day one, I'll be teaching people how to build a fitness business online. But then days 2 and 3, I'm going to be focusing intensely on my seminar series that I've called Cutting Edge Strategies for Physique Transformation. So I'm going to be going over different nutritional program design strategies and different training program design strategies at the highest possible level for the best possible results. Saturday is going to be all 100% focused on muscle building and performance. and Sunday is going to be 100% focused on fat loss and performance. So nutrition and training all weekend, and that's going to be it. Lots going on, lots of hours of lecturing, and anybody who attends is definitely going to be leaving there with all the tools that they need to make training plans and meal plans from scratch. But beyond that, I'll also be offering people completely done for you systems made by myself that they can start using with their clients or on themselves that following Monday. So a ton of value being offered there in Sydney.
That's bold. You're offering done for you programs.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
Everybody's leaving with a completely done for you system made by myself. And if you were to hire me online, the cost of that program alone far exceeds the cost of a seminar ticket. So
wow.
I'm driving home a lot of value for everybody.
That's amazing, man. Well, everyone in Sydney, check out Dan Garner's IG account, which is Dan Garner Nutrition. Is that right?
Yeah. You can find me on Instagram at Dan Garner Nutrition. I post training and nutrition stuff all the time. You can find me on Facebook, Dan Garner Strength Coach and Nutrition Specialist. And if you're interested in building a business online and you're particularly in the fitness business or strength and conditioning business, check out createfreedom.com or the Instagram at Create Coaching.
I love it, man. Thank you. Daniel Howard, any final words from you, mate?
No, that's awesome. Some pretty amazing information. I can't wait.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Question you a little bit more, and So I've been taking a lot of notes throughout that, and can't wait to hear a little bit more and get into it a little bit more detail. It'd be sick.
Love it.
It's going to be great. All right, well, you guys we'll call it a day there, and looking forward to the weekend, Dan.
All right, looking forward to it too. Cheers, everybody. Thank you for listening.